Now the Vice Chancellor's procession. The Vice Chancellor's procession is led in by the Deputy Registrar, Senate Matters, Mrs. Comfort Ehigiato. The Vice Chancellor's entourage, we have in the order in which they are coming into the arena, Directors of Academic Programs, Directors of Units, Deans of Faculties, the Dean of Students, the Dean of Postgraduate Studies, Provost College of Medical Sciences, and Principal Officers of our great university, the Vice Chancellor's procession. Vice Chancellor's procession is the inaugural lecturer. As we remain standing, we shall chant the first two stanzas of the national anthem, followed by the Uniben anthem. had to be very sure before chanting that, because Ahonaroro SAN told me he was on his way, and I know that anytime he's in this arena, I give him that honor. And so, indefatigable, indomitable, and transformational Vice Chancellor, the very delectable Professor Lillian Umwetinya Salami. Please put your hands together. The Vice Chancellor is ably represented by the Acting Vice Chancellor and Deputy Vice Chancellor of Administration, Professor Catherine Ukmola. Another round of applause. Thank you. Former Vice Chancellors of our great university and heads of other institutions of higher learning, principal officers of our great university, present and past, the provost, deans, directors, the inaugural lecturer and family, professors emeriti, other esteemed scholars here present, top government functionaries, my lords, high court judges, your royal highnesses, greatest Uniben staff and students, invited guests, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a star-studded auditorium, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this eagerly awaited 323rd inaugural lecture of the lecture is to be delivered by a former dean of students, a former dean, Faculty of Arts, my own faculty, immediate past orator of the university, and currently, the director of the university's advancement office. This very cerebral scholar is a professor of history and international studies as well as diplomacy. Formally, he is Professor Edward OREGBHEME, ERHAGBE, known simply to us as Eddie ERHAGBE. Put your hands together. And so, characteristic of Eddie ERHAGBE, the topic of this lecture is nurturing the umbilical cord, historicizing the diasporan factor in the developmental matrix of Africa. May I now respectfully invite the Registrar of the University, Mr. Ademola Bobola, MNIM, to introduce formally the Vice Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor's procession. Mr. Registrar.
Madam Vice Chancellor, ably represented by distinguished Professor Catherine Ukmola, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to go on the protocol again will be another long journey, because I could see seated here very distinguished and eminent scholars and very reputable citizens of this country. I therefore want to plead that I be allowed to continue to abide by the protocol as duly established by the university's PRO. However, all courtesies duly extended. On this occasion like this, we look forward for the Vice Chancellor to be here. And of course, all of us have been waiting. But international engagements have called in, and then it's not something that the Vice Chancellor could really bring herself out. But we know that she's following us right now, because the lecturer today is not somebody you can miss his lecture. Because even his posture alone, when he stands, he's communicating already. Yes. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, kindly allow me to just present to us our Vice Chancellor, who is always telling us that she's on the departing launch. But before she departs, we must present her properly to this august body because she's also with us. She has served in different capacities before attaining the position of Vice Chancellor of this university. And after 35 years of having a female Vice Chancellor, she came on board, and it's a position that many tough and very strong men have always been occupying. But this time around, the woman came in, and she has done so very well, wonderfully well. I think we should give her a round of applause. She is currently the chairperson committee of all the 273 vice chancellors of all Nigerian universities, and currently she is very far away attending to Association of African Universities, AAU, and they have an international program right now because she's the vice president of that particular body. Madam Vice Chancellor is also a woman of distinction in terms of raising the cause of women. She has used that position to, at different fora, to canvass issues of women. Recently, we have this program, being the first one for women, empowering them that women can truly lead this country. We should not just leave the game alone to the men. Sorry, I'm one of the women and men, but when I look at where I stayed for 9 months, and then 3 years of, during our own time, it was only 6 months of breastfeeding. It was 3 years of serious breastfeeding. You cannot but remember that women play a very pivotal role in the affairs of men and women. So, Madam Vice Chancellor is also a traditional title holder, having 2 very distinguished titles, the Organity of Igara land, and of course, the one that they don't just give out. Ondo Kingdom doesn't just give out title. She's the Yeye Meso of Ondo Kingdom. So, once again, the Vice Chancellor is following us. Let's put our hands together for Professor Lillian Imoti Salami. Today, we have somebody, many people almost took the acting Vice Chancellor Institute today as the real Vice Chancellor, but she's actually a distinguished professor of ophthalmology. She's one of the people who attend to my eyes anytime I have issues, and she has really spread the gospel of good eyes to the whole wide world, right here from the University of Benin. Professor Catherine Okonwa is leading us today, representing the Vice Chancellor. And of course, we have with us today the distinguished Professor B.A. Aide, distinguished Professor of Pharmacognosis and the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of Ekewa Campus. Please, let's put our hands together for him. The keeper of our treasury. I think the treasury purse should always be full without getting leaked, so that this university can continue to move forward. Mr. Gabriel Osadolo is the acting boss of this university. We have with us the keeper of our books and academic and scholarly publications, Walter Megison Soyo, the Esquire, acting university librarian. We move to the other side of the divide, where we have the provost of our very reputable College of Medical Sciences, Professor Wilson Sado, the acting Dean School of Postgraduate Studies, Engineer Professor S.A. Aliu. And of course, seated next to him is the man we call the Dean of, we used to call him Dean of Struggle, but he's no longer struggling now. He's a Dean of Peace. Our students are now very peaceful. The Dean Student Affairs, Professor Clement Iwodaro. And a man who is always constant, and the constant star, who we have to hold today. If you look at that row, is the one wearing red. The symbolizing the host dean of today, who is going to provide for this very large hall today, everyone must be taken care of. The host dean, Professor Constantine Yuka, I think we should give him a very standing applause. We have representing the Dean of Agric, Dr. O.M. Nwagboje, the Dean Faculty of Agric representative. And of course, the Protem Dean, who is now transforming to a big dean, School of Basic Clinical Sciences, Professor V.J. Ekanem. The Dean School of Basic Medical Sciences, Professor Freddy Agoreyo, is also here. We also have with us today the Dean School of Dentistry, Professor F.O. OREGBHEME. The Dean Faculty of Education, that's where the Vice Chancellor comes from. If I call the Dean my boss, he says no. I said, because you are controlling my boss, the Vice Chancellor. Professor Kingsley Omorogiwa, the Dean Faculty of Education. The Dean Faculty of Engineering, who is still working on alternative sources of power for this university. We don't want any power outage any longer. Engineer Professor E.A. Ogunjo. The Dean Faculty of Environmental Sciences, who is coming from Russia. I hope the Russian-Ukrainian war is coming to an end. If you see his apparel, when it stands up, you know it's actually coming from Russia. Professor Savio Egiato Irugbe Raphael, Dean Faculty of Environmental Sciences. And representing the Dean Faculty of Law, Professor Bright Bazoaye. One of the tallest persons in that park. Thank God the inaugural lecturer is on this side, and Professor Abolagba is no longer there too. So he continues to oppress in terms of height. The Dean Faculty of Life Sciences, not life. Professor N.J. Orue. We have representing the Dean Faculty of Management Sciences, Professor A.O. Oladipupo. The Dean School of Medicine is represented here today by Professor M.O. Enaruna. And we have with us today the Dean Faculty of Pharmacy, Professor Azuka Okpara. The name I used to struggle with, but people have started to forgive me for pronouncing that name. The day I realized that even indigenous of Benin don't pronounce that name very well. The Dean Faculty of Physical Sciences, Professor E.O. Ayowi. Of course, we have with us today too the Director Center for Distance Learning, represented here by Dr. Mrs. Akpon Ebi Omari. I think we should clap for the women this time around. Let's clap for her. Thank you so much. The Director Center for Entrepreneurship Development, Professor E.E. Ogiagbe, is there. Blessed are those who have not seen yet believe. Thank God today we have quite a lot of the clergy, very men of God, women and sisters of God in our midst. Say, blessed are those who have not seen yet believe. Maybe these days I'll be calling, you may not see them, but just believe they're there. We have with us today the Director Center for Educational Technology, Professor Hassan Oahina. And also we have the Director Tetford Center of Excellence for Aquaculture and Fish Technology, Professor Mrs. Patience Ishoma Obo. And we also have the Director JUPEP Program, Professor Tito Ayewi. And the Director Quality Assurance Office, Professor Peter Sede. This time around we have two women, distinguished one, who are also there in the Vice Chancellor's Centorage. Professor Mrs. P.E. Orukwe, the Director of Advanced Digital Engineering Center. And we have with us also the Director, Institute of Child Health, Professor Mrs. Ayebo Sado. The Director, Research and Development Office, Professor M.A. Bamikole. We have also here the Director of External Linkages and Internationalization, Professor E.F.O. Inato. This time around, the Director, Students Guidance Counseling, but really working with students and staff very eminently. Professor Mrs. O.N. are here. And we have the Director of General Studies, Dr. Osamiro Osagiobare. The Director of African Center for Mushroom Research and Technological Innovations. If you need mushroom, I've tasted the mushrooms different times, and many people want to taste this, and they are still working. Professor E.O. Akpaja. And the Director, Institute of Education, all the way from Ekenwa Campus, Dr. K. Imaswe. And we have with us today Acting Director, Institute of Public Administration and Health Services Management, Dr. John Osagai. Yes, this one I will have to struggle with it before I leave the stage. That's engineer, is an engineer anyway. Is the Director of Center for Maritime Studies and ICT. Is Dr. F.O. Here. Don't mind me. The Vice Chancellor has approved. The Vice Chancellor has approved the Chinese version of all the names. And also leading the Vice Chancellor's entourage today is Mrs. C.I. Egiato, the Deputy Registrar in charge of Senate Matters. So let's give her a round of applause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before I drop the microphone for the next aspect, I remember one poem we were used to in those days, Choir Master's Burial. That's the title of the poem. And the choir master was always playing organ when any events happened. But when the choir master was no longer on, when they were doing funeral for him, nobody could even do it. So it became a kind of bad event. But I thank God today that the inaugural lecturer today is a man who is very conversant with the microphone. And nobody is going to do it for him. He is the one who is going to do the microphone work today. I think he deserves some round of applause. It is obvious we are going to have a very nice time when you pull all these very big and wonderful ancestors of this university to come around here to see what is happening. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Madam Acting Vice Chancellor, kindly present the Vice Chancellor's address. Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I bring you very warm greetings from our Vice Chancellor, our indefatigable, visionary, and transformational Vice Chancellor, Professor Lilian Imwetinya Salami, who is unavoidably absent today. She's the chairman of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of all Nigerian universities and the Vice President of the Association of African Universities. She brings you very warm greetings, and I want to welcome our ancestors, like they said, our Professor Emerita, who are always with us. We really thank you and we appreciate you for being here. We also welcome our former Vice Chancellors, Professor Nokaraye, Professor Orumese, FFO Orumese. We welcome Professor Okonofua and Professor Ezemoye all the way from Okada. Thank you very much for being here today. I don't expect anything less because like the registrar said, It is only the orator, our orator, who will bring everybody here today. So welcome. Thank you so much. I welcome you all with great delight to the 323rd in the inaugural lecture series of the University of Benin. Today's lecture is the 94th to be delivered in my tenure as Vice Chancellor of this university. 6th from the Department of History and International Studies, and 24th in the Faculty of Arts. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our lecturer for today. He is Professor OREGBHEME, ERHAGBE, our own university orator. The title of his lecture is Nurturing the Umbilical Cord, Historicizing the Diasporan Factor in the Developmental Matrix of Africa. From him, we don't expect any other title. Well, I hope it will not be as complicated as it sounds. Professor OREGBHEME Edward OREGBHEME ERHAGBE was born on the 28th June 1958 to late Chief John Dennis Michael JP and Madam Katrina Olere ERHAGBE from Akpana, Uzaire, Edo State. He had his primary education at Government Primary School, Auchi, from 1965 to 1970 for the first school living certificate. He attended Our Lady of Fatima College, Auchi, from 1970 to 1975 to obtain the West African School certificate. Professor ERHAGBE gained admission into the University of Benin in 1975, where he obtained the Bachelor of Arts degree in History with a second-class honors upper division in 1979. He thereafter did the mandatory one-year National Youth Service at Obanta Comprehensive High School, Oru Awa, Ogun State, between 1979 and 1980. Professor ERHAGBE obtained the Master of Arts degree in Nigerian History in 1982 from the University of Benin, and he was among the first set of master's graduates from the Department of History. He had the PhD degree in American History in 1992 from Boston University, USA, with a specialty in Black Diasporan Studies under the scholarship of the prestigious Fulbright Exchange Program of the United States of America. Professor ERHAGBE joined the services of the University of Benin as an assistant lecturer on November 8, 1982 in the Department of History and rose through the ranks to the position of professor in 2012. Professor ERHAGBE has held several administrative positions and served in several committees. The following are examples of about 40 of such positions. Congregation Representative, University Furniture Loans Committee, 1994 to 1998. Chairman, Caretaker Committee for the Social Democratic Party of Nigeria, 1992 to 1993. This was a federal government appointment. President, University of Benin Staff Club, 1993 to 1997. Congregation Representative in Senate, University of Benin, 1997 to 2001. Member, University of Benin Certificate Screening Committee, 2001 to 2007. Acting Head, Department of History and International Studies, 2002 to 2004. Acting Director, General Studies Unit, 2005 to 2007. Member, University of Benin Ceremonials Committee, 1998 to 2012. Member, the Governing Council, University of Benin, 2004 to 2009. Acting Dean of Students, University of Benin, 2007 to 2009. National President, American Studies Association of Nigeria, 2003 till date. Dean, Faculty of Arts and Education, Benson Dausa University, 2012 to 2014, sabbatical. Dean, Faculty of Arts, University of Benin, Benin City, 2018 to 2020. Member, Joint Governing Council plus Senate Selection Board of the appointment of substantive bursar, librarian, and Vice Chancellor for the University of Benin. Director, University Advancement Office, University of Benin, 2022 till date. Professor ERHAGBE is a fellow and a member of several professional associations and bodies, such as Fellow, Historical Association of Nigeria, National President, American Studies Association of Nigeria, Member, Association of Study of American Negro Life and History, USA, Member, American Historical Association, USA, Member, Fulbright Alumni Association of Nigeria. Professor ERHAGBE is a recipient of several letters of commendation. Examples include letter of commendation from the Governing Council of the University of Benin, August 25, 2005. Letter of commendation for successful conduct of Students' Union election as the Dean of Students, 16th December 2005. Letter of special commendation for interactive ability that stirred the students of University of Benin into a culture of dialogue as the Dean of Students from University of Benin, 3rd February 2009. He has over 45 publications in local, national, and international journals. He has supervised 2 PhD and over 40 master theses. He has attended many local and international conferences. Professor ERHAGBE has served as an external examiner and assessor for professorial appointments to several universities. He has delivered many papers and lectures in several seminars, workshops, and convocations. At the last count, he had delivered no less than 50 public lectures and keynote addresses across Nigeria. Thank you. Professor ERHAGBE served as the University Orator from 2007 to 2020. He plays table tennis and Scrabble. He is a devout Christian of the Roman Catholic faith, where he belongs to the Order of Knights of St. Mulumba, KSM, Nigeria. He is happily married to barrister Dr. Mrs. Eunice ERHAGBE, an associate professor in the Faculty of Law of this university, and the marriage is blessed with 2 children who are medical doctors. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Edward OREGBHEME ERHAGBE to deliver his inaugural lecture.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our own Vice Chancellor, ably represented here by Deputy Vice Chancellor, had actually fully captured the elegant transformational Vice Chancellor, Professor Lilian Salami, but here represented by another lady of capturing and captivating presence, in the person of Professor our own Okporo. I greet also all others here present, and I want to plead that you allow me to align myself with the already well-established protocol for this day. The dedication of this lecture is to God Almighty. Indeed, to him be all the glory, honor, praise, adoration for all I have achieved and are making me fit and fair to deliver this lecture today. It's dedicated to my darling wife, Dr. Mrs. Eunice ERHAGBE, and our lovely daughters and grandchildren. To my parents, late Chief JDM and Madam Catherine Alianetu ERHAGBE, and to my grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Michael ERHAGBE, and to late Alhaji and Alhaja Abu. To my parents-in-law, late Mr. and Mrs. Michael Suleiman Asegwa, and to my younger brother, late Sir Engineer Patrick ERHAGBE KSN, that passed on just last year. It's also dedicated to our great friend and brother, well known throughout this university, Professor Frank Ogbonaya Otunta of blessed memory. The preamble to my lecture stands on the fact that today is a day of praise for me, Madam Vice Chancellor, that this 26th day of September, I'm able to stand before all of you to deliver this inaugural lecture. This is because at about this time last year, precisely 26th of September 2023, I was just settling down into the intensive care unit of University of Benin Teaching Hospital, where I was received by top medical practitioners of University of Benin Teaching Hospital. And with the prayers of my very heavily based priests and parishioners, God was faithful and He delivered me. And today, it is that the good Lord has given me a second chance. And this is aptly captured by Professor Udo, who on November 27, 2023, sent me a text message. And I quote him. He said, "Thank God for restoring your health. He sees your heart and generous sacrifices and was moved to raise you up. To God, indeed, be the glory." It is therefore that although my birthday remains 28th of June, 26th September has become a landmark year, a landmark month in my life, because instead of funeral remembrance, it is life that we are celebrating. Very quickly, Madam Vice Chancellor, there is an issue in my preamble that deals with the fact that today is the day that ERHAGBE is giving its inaugural lecture. And that is because of my presence in the university community, because of having been privileged to be orator for so many years, because of being a person that is always giving public lectures. I'm sure when some saw the poster, not only did they ask, is it now that he's giving his inaugural lecture? But the reality is that despite those issues, the reality is, even though I have given more than 150 public lectures, some are convocations of some university, some are Founders Day ceremonies, the fact is that it is today, in the honors of the history of the University of Benin, that have finally taken a place. And that is why we thank God for this opportunity to now give this lecture, which is titled, Nurturing the Umbilical Code, Historicizing the Diasporan Factor in the Developmental Matrix of Africa. This is despite the fact
that we have always been seen as historians dealing with Mungo Park. But here we are talking about umbilical cord. We will get to explain this later. The fact is that this is the 323rd lecture in the inaugural lecture series of my alma mater, the greatest university of Benin. The 25th from the Faculty of Arts, in which I was in the very first batch of students admitted into it in 1975, then known as the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. It is the 6th from the Department of History and International Studies, again of which I belong to the first batch of students admitted into it when it was then known as Department of History. And this lecture is following the footsteps of my predecessors, including Professor Bodeka, Professor ERHAGBE, FHSN, Professor Toide, and our OB Osadolo. Before I move on, Madam Vice Chancellor, I want to say that to pay special respect to our colleagues who have departed in the department, and these include Professors Agbodeka, Reverend Father Zemeke, Professor ERHAGBE, Professor Omu, Otoide, Umbeyi, Orikokai, and Dr. Odion Osiki. Most worthy colleagues, may their souls continue to rest in perfect peace. The introduction to my lecture, Madam Vice Chancellor, is that I know that what inaugural lecture is supposed to be, because as captured in my introduction, I've been privileged to be Dean of Students, so many positions, and recently for so many months, I've been sitting up there. And so please let me not bore you on what inaugural lecturer should actually do. But in this my lecture, all I'm trying to do is to present what I've been doing in research, and if possible, some of the non-academic matters I've also been engaged in. And so, there are one or two things I highlighted in my lecture, but we'll leave them for another day. One of them has to do with the importance of education. I thought that time would permit, but not. And that is that in the current contradictions that we are facing in our country, in terms of values, in terms of survival, many are thinking that education is no longer important. The major submission for me is that no matter the problems that we have, no matter what we are contending with, education still remains a veritable instrument for survival as far as our society is concerned. I have also tried to give here the foundations of my lecture, or my title topic, and in it there are quotations that are provided. Please, some of these details are contained in the program or in the booklet that will be shared later on. What we have tried to do here is to point out how African Americans, people who are in the diaspora, we know what diaspora means, have continued to believe that they have interest in what is happening in Africa. And one person that we are all familiar with, and I want to quote him here, is Walter Carrington, former ambassador to Nigeria, U.S. ambassador to Nigeria. He stood on this podium some years ago during the tenure of Professor Oruwese to give one of the what's called first eminent lecture as far as that series was concerned. What did he say? Listen carefully. He says, and I'm quoting, "There is a far-flung African diaspora which sees a revitalized Nigeria as the great hope of the black world. At a time when so many dismiss Africa as a continent made of nations whose leaders are too venal to govern on behalf of their people, we look to Nigeria to prove them wrong." Walter, as we have said, Carrington, 2015. Madam Vice Chancellor, I want to submit that for the past 4 decades, I've been involved in diverse research and writing exercises, which can be categorized into 3, although they are intellectually interwoven. This is because while my main area of specialization remains African diaspora and American history, my earlier research focus was in the history of pre-colonial and colonial Nigerian societies, focusing on Afemai and Esan people. We have also been greatly and intensely involved in interrogating the diverse and intriguing issues and challenges of nation building in Africa. using Nigeria as our focal point of study. The critical question which our title tries to inquire, to interrogate, to elucidate on is, what are the forces of dynamics that help to create, maintain and sustain the relationships between the Africans in diaspora and those in the continent? And what must be done to nurture the umbilical cord that has kept the sons and daughters of Africa in the diaspora intractably connected with the mother continent? The quotations given above, as I have said, point out that although they have been away for so many years, many centuries, they have continued to maintain relationships with Africa. In this section, I try to explain some critical words in the topic. One of them is diaspora. Basically, diaspora has to do with the fact that people of a continent have the continent where they are supposed to be. Those of Asia, those of Africa, the Americas, and all. It also means that citizens of a country have the country where they are supposed to be. But what has been happening is that people, due to certain intricacies and all, are settled in other areas outside of their original homeland. Those communities they establish outside constitute the diaspora. So for us, the African diaspora is, we are talking about those citizens, those people of Africa who are settled outside of the continent. And the great group I've been focusing on is the African Americans, those Africans settled in the diaspora that we call New World, United States, Canada, Bahamas, Jamaica. Those are the people that we are trying to look at, their connections with Africa. The other term I want to explain here, and I have to take permission from the Provost College of Medicine, is that of umbilical cords. Although I'm of history, my wife originally of history, but now a lawyer, our two children are medical doctors. And so I can say that the air I breathe sitting with them has also given medical inspiration. But basically, the umbilical cord definition 2023 is considered both the physical and emotional attachment between mother and the fetus. This structure allows for the transfer of oxygen and nutrients from the maternal circulation into fetal circulation, while simultaneously removing waste materials from fetal circulation to be eliminated maternally. What this is referring to, therefore, is that when we're all in our bellies, mother's bellies, there was that special thing that tied us to our mothers. Through it we got oxygen, through it we got nutrients that sustained us. When it's cut off, you are on your own. But once as long as it remains, we continue to survive. What we are saying here, and we'll explain later, is that those of Africa have continued to maintain that relationship with the continent, although they have been away for so many years. In the upper part of this paper, there were certain terms I looked at, issues of governance, what it means, and all. Development, what it means. This is because these terms are very important and central to the arguments of our presentation. In this other part of this presentation, we try to contextualize, to explain how we came about the diasporan involvement in Africa. We went a long way to explain how, for many centuries, African history was distorted. Europeans painted us with different myths. Basically, we were seen as a dark continent, uncivilized people. But later on, this was to be changed. So in this part of the paper, I try to explain how one of them, for example, Professor Hughes Trevor Rupert, once declared that there was no development in Africa before the coming of the Europeans. That what is considered development was nothing but the gyration of barbarous tribes in picturesque but irrelevant corners of the globe. For some time now, we have had more objective studies that assert correctly that the different myths about Africa are not quite correct. And that is because Africa has been shown to have made a lot of progress. In this other part of the paper, we try to explain how the diaspora was created. The major issue that led to its creation was the transatlantic slave trade. We'll explain that later, whereby millions of Africans were sold by Africans. They were sold by Africans. So the idea of still selling our people, kidnapping and all of these are all historically based. There is evidence for it. So what has really been our main research work and publications? We are focused on the historic, gallant, patriotic, indomitable, and enormous roles the Africans in diaspora have had to and are still playing in reversing the negative images of Africans and Africa. Their fight for and support for the liberation of the continent from European colonialism and white minority regimes. We have also looked at the support that they've given in the development of Africa in the post-colonial period. We have highlighted in our work over the years some of the aspects of the history of my people and ASAM people by way of using historically verified evidence to support the buoyancy and robustness of Africans' early accomplishment for the coming of the Europeans. And so, Madam Vice Chancellor, I now want to plead that very briefly I point out that there is the issue of Africa yesterday and today. What actually is the problem of Africa? I want to say that those that have observed that Africa's development is at a crossroad, that there is actually a number of problems that bedevil our continent. But that has led people to ask, why are Africans like this? Is there something wrong with them? Is there a curse on them? Is there something wrong in their gene? These are questions that we continuously ask. We want to say that the Europeans present us as a dark continent, but it's not quite correct. The African past was robust, a lot of developments took place. Politically, we created mega states, empires, kingdoms. In terms of socio-economic, we moved as well to the extent that the artworks from Benin, for example, built today museums all over the world, showing the ingenuity, creativity, and of course, the artistic capacity of African peoples. In the history of Africa, they later came in contact with Europeans. They first of all bought us as slaves. Later, they were involved in what we call legitimate trade. Later, they now started colonizing us and then imposed themselves on us. That is period of colonization. And of course, we have since won our independence. And so, the major issue here is that many Africans looked forward to Africans really enjoying with independence. But behold, it was not to be. And that is because we have not done well. We have had a lot of administrative problems, governance problems with Africa, as it were. The last, we've given here in our presentation different statistics that show that Africa has had its fair share of brutal, totalitarian, oppressive and repressive regimes, civil strifes and conflicts, which seem to be the order of the day. And so the question really is to be asked, what does the future of Africa look like? Many are almost giving up. The Japan spirit is all over the place. But I want to say that as a historian, I believe that there is hope for Africa. Being a historian means that we have litany of nations or people that change the destinies of themselves. That can also still be done as far as Africa is concerned. And so, Madam Vice Chancellor, permit me at this stage to highlight some of the highlights of our academic odyssey. The major point we are trying to state here is that although the African Americans, the Canadian Americans, all those that were taken away, although they have been away, they still continue to maintain their relationship with the African continent. Why did that happen? And how can that be sustained? In this, we in addition state some things that we'll be looking at in due course. In terms of our research contributions, we have tried to highlight some of the issues we investigated. One of them has to do with the career of a man known as Martin Delaney, who was part of what we call the Back to Africa movement. And that is because for the Africans in the New World, while they were facing problems, They were asking, how are we going to survive? At a point, it now came that they should be sent back to Africa. Some of them on their own were almost volunteering to return to Africa. Why? Because they thought that Africa was in need of evangelization. And so to that extent, they had to work to return. We looked at the career and we established this in my work, ERHAGBE 1996. And we said that at the end of the day, although the African American visited Nigeria, Abeokuta, he went back and they abandoned the idea of returning to the continent. We also looked at another angle in 1997. There is what we call the American Colonization Society that was put in place to see how Africans were eventually sent back to Liberia. They are there, returnees. And the question was that since they are there, they might help to foster development in Africa. That is a major work that we did in ERHAGBE in 1997. We also went on that although Liberia was established, it was not discovered that the Back to Africa movement was not the way to go. Rather, they had to remain in America, remain in the New World, and work to contribute to the development of Africa. That is a new area of focus, and these new areas, we did a number of works, including ERHAGBE 1994A, ERHAGBE 1994B, 1996, 1995, 2006, 2007, 2010, and ERHAGBE and IFIDOM in 2011. We want to add here that there were some of those African Americans that believed they must still remain to really fight for Africa and not come back to Africa. One of them was W.B. Du Bois, and I examined his career through very extensive research in the work I published in 2011. Through our studies, we were able to establish that one of them, African Americans, started the process of contributing to Africa in the person of Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was well respected in America, and then when there was threat to colonizing Liberia, he moved and got the American president to defend Liberian independence. That is why Liberia was never conquered by the colonialists. We also want to add, this actually we examined in the work in ERHAGBE 1996. With myself and IFIDOM, we did a lot of work, and through interviews and many things that we did, looking at original documents, we were able to establish how African Americans have worked to assist Africa, how they have contributed to African liberation. And a number of works in that regard I clearly highlighted. In 2006, there was a major write-up we did, which had to do with Ethiopian invasion by Italy. Italy, at that time, in 1935-36, invaded Ethiopia. African Americans back in the United States and all mobilized resources, protested, called on the League of Nations and all to protect Liberia, that's the independence of Ethiopia. And this we did in a work in 2006. Later on in 2008, we also looked at how there were concrete steps taken by them to defend again the whole independence of Ethiopia. Although they did not succeed, the fact remains that this was a demonstration of that commitment to the defense of Africa. The other major areas, Madam Vice Chancellor, that we try to look at has to do with the role of different groups established by African Americans to take care of African interests. There's a body known as the Congressional Black Caucus, Trans-Africa Incorporated, Council on African Affairs, African Liberation Support Committee, and the American Liberal Leadership Conference on Africa. They made very concrete efforts to the decolonization and liberation of Africa. These were the origins of a number of works that we have highlighted here concerning CBC, Trans-Africa, the works, some of them, I was privileged to visit libraries and holdings in Washington, D.C., to interview even some of the participants, and those gave us a lot of originality in the work that we did at the time in question. At the end of the day, it is that we're able to establish, among other things, that the Africans outside took pragmatic steps to assist Africans by way of mobilizing for them. This explains why, when Nelson Mandela was freed at the time, he visited the United States, and he said that when they were in jail, hearing and seeing pictures of African Americans being arrested for protesting to support them, it was part of what gave them courage. And which means that for centuries, they've continued to support African development. We have also gone ahead to look at the assistance in a major paper I did, which had to look at in the future. Independence has come. What can really now be done in order to protect African American interests when it relates to Africa? So, Madam Vice Chancellor, the point we are making in our work, which has become well settled, is that the Africans that were taken away, they knew their origins, and they continue to fascinate with Africa, and to that extent, they maintain relationship with them. The Africans themselves appreciated them, but after independence, there has been a problem. In the last paper I referred to, in the days of Abacha, African Americans wanted to start criticizing Abacha. Then, of course, they were told, please face your America, leave us alone. And that is the contradiction, because they helped to bring about independence, but now to enjoy it, they are being told that they have no stake as far as Africa is concerned. So, Madam Vice Chancellor, I said we just have to try to highlight. I want to assure the members of this inaugural lecture audience that these issues that we have highlighted are well, robustly, comprehensively put together as far as our lecture material is concerned. We have also tried, because there is the issue of development in Nigeria today. Nigeria is having crisis, Africa is in crisis. So myself and one of my students, an associate professor now, Professor Ohi, and interestingly, another of my PhD students even delivered a lecture, his own inaugural lecture in July of this year, making great strides and all. We looked at different aspects of issues of Nigerian democracy, the electoral system, the issue of removal of officers, the issue of electoral transparency. These have led me to write a number of papers, and I've also left that to enter the issue of education, its importance to national development. And that is where we have emphasized the issue of what Africans must do, Nigerians must do, in order for them to continue to make sure that progress is made. In all of this, I also believe that charity must begin from home. Because if at the end of the day, you study America, you study Europe, you study Nigeria, you don't study Uzaiwe, you don't study Apana, you have not yet started. And that explains why we also took time to look at the history of Isako people, the whole Afromine, also to look at the Esan history, and in all of these, we're able to demonstrate that our people had made remarkable progress in terms of what they were doing before the coming of the Europeans. For some of these, for example, we see ERHAGBE 1997, 2004, 2005, and Ifido and ERHAGBE 2008. There are other works that we have looked at, all of which, as we have said, have helped us to make our impact as far as our society is concerned. Madam Vice Chancellor, conscious of the time, I want to state that apart from my research, I've been conscious of the fact that there are three major responsibilities of an academic. One of them is, of course, research. But there is the issue of lecturing or teaching, and there is the issue of community services. I know that one of my vice chancellors years ago tried to see how there could be input of the way lecturers teach in terms of promotion. But what we still have running is that whether you teach or not, whether you are doing well or not, whether you do community service or not, it is irrelevant. Paper now, paper. How many do you have? But I want to stand modestly to say, Madam Vice Chancellor, I have been a consummate academic that has been teaching, that has been lecturing, that has also been performing community service. Some of these issues I have clearly highlighted here because apart from teaching to my students, I have taught general studies in this university since the 1990s. And indeed, most of the professors in the University of Benin today were my students one time or the other. And I dare say also that a good percentage, the reason being of the students of the University of Benin, and of course in Benin University, they are indirectly my students. Because we produced a book, Nigerian Peoples and Culture, which the two universities have adopted for the almost last 20 years. And all those students that have taken those courses have listened and heard. That is why when I was in the hospital, on my bed, the boy that was taking care of me as one of the physiotherapists just came around and I said, did you go to the University of Benin? I said, yes. Okay, did you read Nigerian Peoples and Culture? He said, yes. I said, you were my student. He said, why? I said, go to chapter 3 of that book. I was the author of it. So in this work also, we have tried to point out, excuse me, I know that time is running fast, but I must drink water, otherwise something will happen. So Madam Vice Chancellor has actually captured so many of my responsibilities, but there was one that was so important or has been so important to me. And that was because in 2014, I had the rare privilege of being among the 400 plus Nigerians that were gathered in Abuja to hold what is known as the National Conference, where we discussed, debated Nigerian issues and challenges. It's a thing of joy to me, great pride, that the recommendations we made then, the problems that we analyzed, those things are still relevant as far as Nigerian society is concerned. Part of our challenge, we set up committees, we never use their reports. I also want to state that I have been a name that is almost known everywhere. I enter restaurants, I have nowhere to hide. I cannot be a bad boy because anywhere I enter, somebody must know me. And so the issue here is that nearly all the bodies around, Nigerian Labour Congress, TUC, NBA, FIDA, NUT, and all of them have always called me to give them lectures. In addition to this, I'm a child of the media. We talk about ITV, we talk about channels, NTA, EBS, AIT. Just to confirm this, even though I was not too strong preparing for Inaugural, I was still on NTA. And my persons were calling me from the US, Daddy, you are still looking good. And of course, is that we have tried to carry the department, the history department, the University of Benin, anywhere we go. And it is always something that we have been very proud of. I want to pledge, because it's not a valedictory lecture, I want to pledge to continue to diligently, conscientiously, dedicatedly, and patriotically discharge responsibilities entrusted to me now and in the future. My commitment to my profession as a lecturer and my discipline of history and international studies and diplomacy remains unalloyed, remains unwavering, and remains indomitable. From what we have highlighted so far, we have just emphasized that African Americans try very well to help Africa, and we are asking that something must be done to maintain it. That is the umbilical cord we are talking about, so that the relationship can continue to be robust. That is why we are now moving to recommendations as far as how that must be achieved. Number one, that we are saying that the very impressive and vibrant contributions that Africans in the diaspora have made to Africa over the years should be highlighted and disseminated, just like ERHAGBE is doing now. Number two, Africans in the continent should actively participate and commemorate the Black History Month that is marked in the US in February of every year. African states, number three, should put in place appropriate policies and enact laws that will facilitate African diaspora involvement in Africa in form of tourism and investments. And as we recommended by the 2014 National Confab, of which I was a member, the demand by Nigerians in the diaspora, and by extension, other African nationals in diaspora, to be allowed to vote should be considered and appropriate legislative amendments be implemented before it is effected. Number 5, other African countries should put in place bodies such as the Nigerians Diaspora Commission that will address the needs and demands of Africans in the diaspora. 6, African leaders. This is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. It's almost the kernel of my presentation. African leaders should show greater patriotic commitment to good governance and development. That would positively change the now pervasive negative images of Africans, both at home and in the diaspora, which is the genesis of the disrespect and humiliation that Africans are globally subjected to. If we get it right, we will be respected. Number 7, Africans in the diaspora should continue to positively invest in their former countries, regions, states, local governments, and even towns and villages with a view of keeping the light burning as led by early Africans in the diaspora who sacrificed their resources to support Africans, especially in the early days of Pan-Africanism. Other recommendations are there, including the fact that African countries' diplomatic offices which are abroad should be well equipped, both in human resources and material facilities, to adequately protect the Africans and their interests abroad. There is the need to once again put together a cultural reunion of Africans, both at home and in the continent, in the format of the African and Black Festival of Arts and Culture. That's the first time, which took place in Nigeria in 1977. 10, adults, Nigerians, and other Africans in the diaspora should be conscious of the need to keep their offsprings aware of their African roots and to identify with the homeland. This is important because in this inaugural lecture, one major issue I had to deal with, but I didn't highlight here, is what we call the new diaspora. The new diaspora is different from that of the old diaspora. The old diaspora was by involuntary decision. That is by way of the slave trade. The new diaspora is one of the decisions of those that are going by themselves. Madam Vice Chancellor, I normally put this to my GST students. I say, as we are sitting in this hall now, we left home and said we are coming to the inaugural of ERHAGBE. If we are told that there is a plane ready to take people from here to America, how many will remain in this place? I know. So it is really that there is a problem in that regard. And finally, we are saying that there should be deliberate efforts by countries of Africa to recognize, celebrate, and honor their citizens in the diaspora that accomplish outstanding achievements in their host communities in the diaspora. A number of Africans are excelling. By way of a conclusion, we have worked to historicize. Historicize means to put it in historical perspective. The circumstances and dynamics that led to the creation of the first African diaspora and the emergence of the more recent second strand of the diaspora. That there has been in place a vibrant and organic relationship between Africans in diaspora and those in the continent. In the final analysis, the vices of greed, corruption, nepotism, ethnicity, and tribalism, and religious fanaticism need to be addressed squarely for Africa to stop wasting and dissipating energies in wrong directions in order to move the continent forward. There is the obvious need to invest in the use of this continent because at the end of the day, there is a need for emancipation from hunger, disease, poverty, and underdevelopment, which today Africa is almost known for. We are happy that Nigeria has since recognized the importance of the diaspora. They set up a commission for that purpose, and not too long ago, a special fund was set up, as we captured in this write-up, where they call it the $500 million investment thing where African Nigerians diaspora we expect to come and invest. Let's hope they don't eat the money again. Our researches and publications from the historical perspective show that Africans in the diaspora have always maintained their umbilical cord with the continent and have worked to give back to Africa. Africans now owe it to them, both the first generation and new generation of diaspora Africans, to enjoy and benefit both materially and psychologically for the developments Africans will make. We have also observed here how they set up the Diaspora Commission in Nigeria in 2017. We strongly recommend that the points identified above, if well taken care of, will immensely bring about how politically, economically, socially, the umbilical cord between the Africans and those in the diaspora will be sustained. Of course, I'm a master of protocol. I bow when Madam Digital tells me time is up. And that leads me now to acknowledgements. Confession here, a lot of them, Father, you are here, is that writing this inaugural lecture, part of the greatest challenge I had, understandably, was trying to deal with acknowledgement. For a man that has been here for so many years, for somebody that has been almost a campus politician, a local champion, one form or the other, a man that is a person of the whole media, who can I leave out? A man that is in the church, a man that moves with Muslims, a man that has been a president of the club. How can I write a section on acknowledgement? What I therefore tried to do was to just use some few names as points of contact. And even at that, the few points of contact I decided to use almost now became another inaugural lecture on its own. But I must start by thanking, still in all of this, the Holy Trinity for everything that has made me, or for what they have made me to be today. But I'm Vice Chancellor, our own Professor Lilian Imotie-Nselami. I cannot thank her enough, because we've known her for many years. We worked together as dean for some time. But she has given, again, impressive demonstration of how leadership can transform an institution. And indeed, we use such local examples to talk how our nation can also be transformed. And so I salute Madam Vice Chancellor, and I congratulate her on her tenure that is shortly coming to an end. Of course, our DVCs, our registrar, our bursar, I must greet you. The month is ending. My salary might not be paid if I don't greet you well. The librarian, all of you are greeted. My former vice chancellors, nearly all of them, Professor T.M. Yusufu, I was admitted during his time. Becky, when I graduated. Alole Williams, when I was employed, granted me sabbatical leave. Onokorai, the man that also gave me what I call public exposure to become what we can call today an MC of international repute. Our own Professor Nao Wanze, who unfortunately, many of these, they promise, Wanze is not in the country. Professor Oshodi of Blessed Memory, and our own tall, very quiet, but effective Vice Chancellor, Professor Orowese. I greet all of you. I must state here, I greet all former Vice Chancellors of other universities. My own brother, a great digital Vice Chancellor is here, Professor Ezemoye of Benin University. And then I must greet the Vice Chancellor when I did my sabbatical at BIU, Professor McDonald Idu. The story behind his tenure is that he gave me the opportunity to be an acting vice chancellor in a number of occasions. So if you come to my fight today and I'm writing my CV, I put there, former acting vice chancellor. Of course, vice chancellor, not vice chancellor. Now so, I greet so many of our registrars, principal officers, bursars. Their names are there in the write-up. Our librarian, And of course, DRs of Senate matters. Talking of, I'm using the current DR, our own Mrs. C. Egiato, to say thank you all for the great jobs that you have been doing. And of course, the provost, deans, and directors. Using my own LSC, Luca, that is the dean of my faculty, and of course my neighbor as well, a co-member of taking the black tea to make the blood run well. I greet you all, the great deans, directors, and provosts. My parents, grandparents, and parents-in-laws, my uncles and aunties. One of them is here, Auntie Stella. I greet you, ma'am. Thank you, the leader now of our life, who just had her 80th birthday on Saturday. Thank you, congratulations, ma'am. I also want to thank the administrators at different levels. You heard I was dean of students, I was this. There are those administrators that make life possible for you. I greet you all, and I pray God to continue to bless you. The providers of municipal services in the university, especially the estate department and security division, thank you for all you have been. My colleagues of the history department, using Professor Sadolo, and of course, Professor Efidon, my next door mate, fellow Olofobai, a junior to me secondary school, I greet all of you in the department. I also greet all the members of the Faculty of Arts and other colleagues throughout the university, both here and in other universities. My religious leaders, including bishops, archbishops, monsignors, reverend fathers, and sisters, and the entire members of the laity, St. Albert, I greet you. My worthy brothers and sisters of the sacred line of the Knights and Ladies of St. Mulumba, Nigeria, and all other nine tools, I greet you. All the medical personnel that have over the years been there for me and my family, especially those of the health center, Dr. Oscar Anozie, and of course those of UBTH, thank you for making me to still be able to stand today. My residential neighbors and friends, thank you. The reflectors, Professor Kolocha, Professor Izemoye, Gia Lumoro, Anyeku, ERHAGBE Baba Miliki, and my humble self, it has been a great being with you. Right here, I have justices maintained, because otherwise we could be taken for contempt. In this hall today, we have the former retired CJ of our state, the President of Justice Archer, and we have others, Justice Obiawe, and others that are here today. Thank you all, and I've never tried to commit crime because I know they are there to protect me. Members of the senior staff club, different sections, happy people, afternoon session, South, billiard and Scrabble juice, I greet all of you. Associations I belong to, I greet you. Finally, there is seat time. Okay, yeah. Oh yes, okay. Hey, thank you. Thank you. So, I'm being ready, I know. At this point, there are so many, and I must really, because it's captured, the able staff of the PRO's office, especially the digital PRO, Dr. Mr. Haniri, McDonald's, Ayugubo, that is always playing the organ. I greet all of you. Thank you. At this point, Madam Vice Chancellor, if I must eat at home again, if I must be protected, I must now at this point, and I want to read, to say that my spiritually confirmed DNA second half, who I found when I was an undergraduate student, the beautiful, shy, undiluted natural princess, Miss Eunice Odufa Suleiman, that made me to travel to Zaria, to Jos, to Gongola in pursuit of her, that decided to return with me to Nigeria, even though she was stayed back, so that university will not pick me. The lady that has given me children, I thank you, and she is an accomplished academic, because she's an associate professor of law, she's a USA certified guidance counselor, and of course, she is a great barrister. And she gave me two beautiful daughters. These beautiful daughters are medical doctors. And through them, I'm blessed with grandchildren. And in them, there are boys now. And this, I want to say thank you all. And of course, I want to plead, anybody I've left out, you know I love you. It's on that note that I hereby take a bow from the stage on this 323rd lecture of the University of Benin. Thank you. Thank you. And God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all.
Is truly historic. Truly historic. Now, you have done your clapping. I now want you to clap for Professor ERHAGBE. When an orator delivers a lecture, you do not expect anything less. And so once again, a bigger round of applause. May I now respectfully invite the Acting Vice Chancellor to summarize the lecture.
Ladies and gentlemen, you must agree with me that the orator himself has done justice to the topic. So, well, this is just a brief summary because he has done it. A major strand in United States of America and African history and international relations is the recognizable and influential number of people of African descent who are resident in the USA and other countries of the world, commonly referred to as the New World. These descendants of Africa, who constitute part of what is referred to as the African diaspora, were forcibly brought into the British colonies in the America, including 13 that became the United States of America, following their declaration and eventual gaining of independence. The lecture recommends ways on how the court can bind Africans in the diaspora and those in the continent should be nurtured, and what Africans should do to earn respect globally. These recommendations are contained in the lecture.
Thank you, ma. Please clap for my Acting Vice Chancellor. Now, those who are serving, I don't want you to stop serving because it's a large crowd, but please do so quietly. And if you are receiving the food also, do so quietly. May I now invite the immediate family members of the lecturer to step forward. The brothers, the sisters, please also join. Please come forward, support him as he is decorated by the Acting Vice Chancellor with the Medal of Honor. And as we do that, we want to recognize the presence. Please stop talking, let's listen. Please put your hands together for the spouse, Dr. Eunice ERHAGBE. Clap also for the children, Dr. Lizzie ERHAGBE Umolu, Dr. Emily ERHAGBE OREGBHEME. Please put your hands together. Their son-in-law, Mr. Dr. C. OREGBHEME, sister-in-law, Mrs. Christy Inaugural. We welcome all members of the ERHAGBE family. Please clap for them. Also in this star-studded house today, we have Senator Roland Obie. We have former Chief Judge of Edo State, Honorable Justice Joe Archer. Welcome, my Lord. We welcome Honorable Justice Victor Oviawe, Honorable Justice Aibona Terry Momodu, High Court of Justice, Edo State. We welcome you. We welcome the former Vice Chancellor of our great university, Professor Emeritus Andrew Onoke Orayo. Please put your hands together. Put your hands together also for another former Vice Chancellor of the University of Benin, Professor Faraday Orumese. Put your hands together. We welcome the Vice Chancellor of Inaugural University of Okada, Professor Lawrence Ezemoye. Please clap, 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 clap. We welcome Professor Emeritus T.O.K. Audu. Welcome, sir. We welcome Professor Emeritus Bob Osaze. We welcome Professor Emeritus and Mrs. Raymond Eliho. We welcome the Center Leader of SERI, Professor Friday Okonofwa. Put your hands together, please. We welcome the Chairman, Agen Longspan Industries, Right Honorable Chavalier Andrew Agemome. We welcome former registrars of our university, Mrs. Gladys Ogborodo and Mrs. Otasoye Oshodi. Please put your hands together. We welcome the former Acting Vice Chancellor, Ambrose Ali University, Professor Benson Osadolo. We welcome former DVC Kewan Campus, Professor Joel Abolagba. We also welcome a member of the university's governing council, Professor Maureen Ebonwoyi. Welcome very much Reverend Father Andrew Obiyan of St. Francis Catholic Church and Reverend Father Dr. Jude Chike Anara of St. Albert's Catholic Church, Uniben. Put your hands together for them, please. Welcome the past presidents of the Uniben Alumni Association. They are Professor M.I. Ikenebome, Chief Macaulay Omo Azubene. We welcome the founding chairman, Distinguished Alumni Forum, Sir Barrister Ben Omo Akigbe. Put your hands together for these worthy alumni. We welcome the president, past president, Nigerian Institution of Surveyors, Sir Solomon Ojekere, MFR. Welcome, sir. We welcome the president of Mindex Publishing, the digital publisher, Engineer Ben Anagoye. Welcome. We welcome Benson Idahosa University Orator and Director of Programs, Professor Mark Iwile. Welcome. We welcome the professional successor of Professor ERHAGBE, the one and only Uniben Orator, Professor Mike Darale. Please put your hands together. We welcome Chief Oseni A. Lama, the Okairiore of Benin Kingdom. Welcome, Chief. We welcome Professor Lawrence Asebwa, SAN. We welcome Professor Medina Kadiri. Welcome, Ma. We welcome Professor Joseph Osenekai, former Dean Physical Sciences. We welcome Professor Henrietta Obo, former Dean Basic Medical Sciences. We welcome Professor Nathaniel Inedbejin, former Dean of Law. We welcome another former Dean of Law, Professor Violet Aibokairo. Please put your hands together. We welcome Professor Eke Orobato. We welcome Professor Eric Omogbai. Welcome, Daddy. We welcome Professor Mrs. Felicia Ofoegbo. We welcome Professor Mrs. Stephanie Iredosa. We welcome Professor Mrs. Antonia Clark. We welcome Professor Mrs. Kokure Erafona. We welcome the Acting Director of Alumni Relations, Dr. Obeki Stephen Obeki. Put your hands together. We welcome all knights, all ladies of St. Mulumba. We welcome Our Lady of Fatima Old Boys Association. We welcome the Achievers ISD 2007-2008 Alumni Association of the University of Benin. We welcome you all, beautiful men and women, as we conclude the 323rd, the inaugural lecture series of the University of Benin. We shall now take, yes, thank you. Clap if you want to clap. Uniben is doing great. Uniben is doing great. And so, we shall rise now to take the Uniben anthem, and then the third stanza of the national anthem. Please remain standing. The Vice Chancellor's procession will leave the auditorium now.